today we are going to, I don't know why I use the word dive into. I don't know what we're diving into. I'm going to read as I've been reading today, continue reading. Today will be chapter 11 from the book To Be Told by Dan B. Allender, PhD. God invites you to co-author your future. I'm really enjoying this book. This is another long chapter. These are long chapters here. And whenever there's, people, even as the Good Shepherd who does share and spend and devote my life to living for heaven on earth. It's a big job. So we need to get right into it. That's why I say dive right into it. Some people say going up to the skies. I say I'm diving into the skies. Who dives upwards, right? The Good Shepherd, Natalie. Chapter 11, The Fruit of Fasting. I awakened at 3:30 a.m. It was not a worry rising. There was no crisis. It was not an abrupt thrust into wakefulness due to an unsettling dream. I hadn't even had pizza for dinner. I simply woke up and I felt a prompting to rise. But I tend not to obey those moments. I figure if God wants me to rise, he can yell just a little louder. He usually doesn't. I've been told that I might be missing moments of significant revelation, or it might be, at those times, maybe rather, I'm uniquely called to pray, and that disaster might prevail if I don't. But I figure if I'm that necessary to the kingdom of God, we're all in big trouble. So I usually just go back to sleep. But not that morning. That time I got out of bed. I rose easily when the words came to me. Give up sleep. I went downstairs and turned on a light along with our fake fire. The flames are even and monotonous, but they flicker enough to hypnotize. I let my mind wander and eventually it found a resting spot. A video of my biological father and me copied from an old home movie made on Christmas morning when I was 3. My father had a little more than 6 months to live, and it would be many years before I would know that he had even existed. As I sat staring at the flames, I pictured my father as he is on the video, handsome, dark, surprisingly gentle and attentive. He is also strangely distant from the camera, and I suspected from the woman who was making the home movie. In the video, I am little, persistent in my play with the folds of his bathrobe. I'm searching for something without giving it my direct attention. All 3 of us, the filmmaker, the father, and the little boy, are lost in 3 separate worlds. The tree sparkles, and the presents are strewn around the floor. It is meant to be a happy scene. But as I project the movie in my mind, I could barely watch without screaming. I felt a sudden, strong urge. Take and eat! It was too disconcerting to continue watching the home movie, so I decided to make some coffee, toast with jam, and cereal. But the voice said, give up food! This time the voice felt audible, though it was not. The war was on. Would I remain sitting there, feeling the glowing hunger, or would I feed the inner ache with toast and hot coffee, dulling the presence of my biological father who was gone before I even got to know him? I chose to fast, and the next 3+ hours were some of the hardest I can remember. It was as if God chose to parade across the flickering fire the faces, images, and scenes of one betrayal after another. I witnessed once again the betrayals related to older men, whom I had known through Boy Scouts, football, college, seminary, first ministry. These were mentors and fathers. I don't know what Peter experienced when God gave him a vision of a cloth coming down from heaven with unclean animals on it, and then told him to eat. Was it a hallucination or a dream, or an event as tangible and discreet as filling up your gas tank yesterday afternoon? And does it even matter? The cloth descended, and on it were animals that Peter had been taught since he was a boy were unclean. But then a voice told him to eat. What do we do with the voices that tell us to eat or give it up? Especially when the directive goes against every fiber of our being. As I stared into the fire, the stage descended, and on it were the characters of my play. I fasted for nearly 4 hours from sleep and food, from the ever-present blessing of provision, so that I could make a space on the stage for the characters of my stories to speak their parts. They spoke lines I knew since I had been there when the words were first spoken, but the sequence of the characters' appearances and the force of their words were new and horrible. I was called to enter a desert of death and deceit, a wasteland of broken promises to make room for God's entrance from stage left. I sat there and watched a newsreel of my life. Each face and presence spoke an ache that excavated my emptiness. As the hours progressed, I stopped feeling haunted, hungry, or even sad. The pain had flashed like lightning bursts. The wind howled, and the pain, rather the rain, pelted me until I was bruised. I had weathered the storm, and it had passed. Now the voices remained, and those who had betrayed me remained betrayers. But I was at home with them, because alongside me was the greatest of all betrayers, God, the one who had turned his back on his own son. Fasting from any nourishment, activity, involvement, or pursuit for any reason sets the stage for God to appear. Listen to my ladies. Storm! Ladies! Fasting from any nourishment, activity, involvement, or pursuit for any season sets the stage for God to appear. It was my season to feel the rush of story and to make a place inside to receive it, but I had no idea why. Fasting is not a tool to pry wisdom out of God's hands or to force needed insight about a decision. Fasting is not a tool for gaining discipline or developing piety, whatever that might be. Instead, fasting is the bulimic act of riddling ourselves of our fullness to attune our senses to the mysteries that swirl in and around us. Sometimes God shows up, and sometimes he feeds us, and every now and then he throws his wild glory before us like bursting constellations, and it's all we can do to wait for him to leave, lest we be destroyed in his presence. I'm laughing at Storm. Storm! Storm! Come here, lady! So I sat in this busy, empty room, watching God consume some of my deepest hurt with the lightning fury of his fierce presence. There was nothing I could do but surrender to being the theater of his odd and wild ways. Ultimately, however, I would confess that his bread of bitterness is better than the sweetest fare I have ever tasted. I took and ate, and it was good. My wife came downstairs around 7 a.m. and asked what I'd been doing. I told her, ridding myself of this earth. Just space travel. She raised an eyebrow. When I miss a meal, I have to remind myself that I likely won't die. It's no surprise, then, that I'm more familiar with the finer points of the molecular structure of helium than I am with fasting. I don't like being hungry, and I don't like absence, letting go, departure, or living in the middle ground between life and death. Fasting enters the terrain of loss for the sake of hope, and I'm not at all comfortable in that territory. I once had heard an expert on fasting say, you have to develop a heart to fast. I don't doubt that to be true, though my spirit is willing, but my body is weak. Fasting requires relinquishing one's body at that point when it most craves satisfaction. Fasting is a testing, a cleansing, and a desert struggle with the idols that dull the body's keen awareness that we are not home. Fasting calls us to enter our orphaned, exiled, and widowed heart, and none of us wants to go there. Similarly, none of us wants to relinquish our story to God, but we must. I don't know what that means exactly, but I do know it when I don't relinquish it. When I cling to my pain, it feels like hoarding. I remember a betrayal, and I wallow in the unrighteousness of the hurt. I turn it around and around in my mouth and savor its bitter juices. If someone came to clear my plate from the table, I'd snarl and guard my prey. It's mine, and no one can know the depth of the wound. To relinquish my hurt involves asking God not so much to take the pain away, but to enter the sacred ground. Like a procedure that involves opening a wound further to promote healing, the cure seems as painful as the disease. We want our painful story healed without realizing that a greater pain will come as the physician begins to cut and clean out the infection. Fasting is a part of this cutting and cleaning, and fasting begins with the acknowledgement that I've tried to be the father to my own orphaned loneliness, the son to my own estranged confusion, and the Holy Spirit to my widowed shame. I have fed myself bread, much of it legitimate and good, yet it could not salve the wound or fill the emptiness. I may know this to be true to the depths of my synaptic core, but my stomach doesn't. My stomach is a god. My dumb stomach knows only two states, full and empty, and it must be led to experience what my soul already knows: we are not at home. I know my body won't go there without being prompted. My body must come to know God's fatherly provision, and that understanding comes in the quiet that follows the onslaught of the storm. The Father brings shalom that passes all understanding, meaning that the peace he gives is not something we know rationally. Instead, Knowing his peace comes through experience that is not mere cognition. As we submit our body to God's fatherly presence, we open space within us for his kind of peace. It is a peace that enters paradox as the field of play. And such is the paradox behind Scripture that says, without irony, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. I know that peace when my Father soothes me in his lap and bridges all my sorrow to his glory. I must relinquish my fight enough to see through the mist of mystery. His presence is barely discernible, but I find its outline in the counters of my story. So will I surrender to my Father's comforting of me, an orphan? I also must come to know God's presence as a friend who walks with me, my companion and brother, God the Son. Our alienation aligns us with this ultimate alien, the maker of heaven and earth, who also was the despised one of this earth. He is the face at whom we rage contempt. His beard has been plucked and he knows shame, but he is not bound by it. He mocks shame. He refuses to remain quiet in his aloneness. In fact, he revels. He seizes the advantages of being a fool and beckons us to shed our rags and run and play without fear. My body is meant to romp and race with him. I am a stranger and an alien who now has a brother. Yet my body needs more than parental agape love and the philia of a shame-free friend and companion. I am also made for the sensual, erotic embrace of a lover. God, the Spirit, winsomely woos, allures, and ravishes us. The Spirit is our lover. The Spirit is wisdom, who is personified in the book of Proverbs as a woman of enormous beauty and wiles. She invites us into her house with fragrances and the promise of warmth, touch, satisfaction. Fasting prepares my heart to receive a father, a friend, and a lover. It helps me name the condition of my soul, which has been filled with counterfeits and which now aches for the real one. In many ways, fasting is a form of detoxification. It begins to break our addictive attachment to lesser gods to make room for the one God. Fasting has for millennia been associated with sin, repentance, and cleansing. So it's no wonder that when we fast, we initially feel furious and out of control. Fasting reveals how wed we are to the power of things, even legitimate good things. As hunger swirls and the early storm of fasting begins to brew, we have an opportunity to sit in and with our body. And if we listen, we will hear the countless voices of suffering we have silenced in our busy flight from our wounds. We can let them speak and let them name their heartache. Fasting releases toxins of loneliness and shame. But don't turn from the stories or the characters that begin speaking, even shouting. Listen, receive, and submit. In due season, the pain will quiet and your heart will be invited to embrace all the stories of your life. Relinquishment leads to an intensification of sense and sensibility. As we fast, and even slightly break the hold of our stomach-filling idolatry, our senses become more acute. And the more sensually aware we are of the world around us and in us, the more sensible we become. Fasting intensifies the colors, sounds, smells, tastes, and touch of life. Paul brilliantly assessed the effect of addictions. He wrote, "So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts. Having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continual lust for more." Addictions make us dull. We are meant to be sensitive, but as we deaden our senses, we compensate by trying to bring them back to life through more indulgence. The more we do so, the more we need to do so. We are on a cheap pony ride that turns in tighter and tighter circles until the tether rope is wound so tightly around the center pole that neither pony nor rider can take even one more step. Thus, we are immobilized. An addiction is a tragic, two-edged sword. Every addiction dulls the soul while simultaneously increasing an insatiable craving for more. The result is an indulgence in a perverse sensuality that seems as if it will create life. But over time, it actually kills desire. The result is bondage, an attachment that suffocates rather than frees one to breathe. Sadly, most people assume addictions are the domain of the undisciplined or the socioeconomically deprived. Such an assumption, of course, never looks below the surface at our craven adulteries of consumerism, greed, codependency, schedule obsession, and mania with power and reputation. Addiction touches us all. Fasting brings us to a suffering surrender, and if we continue fasting, it will inevitably lead to quiet. The quiet is not quiescence. The quiet is like the pregnant millisecond before the starter's pistol fires. The body is tensed but not tight. It is prepared, leaning into the sound that is to pierce the air and call forth a burst of passion and movement. Fasting is far more than letting go. Fasting anticipates the air being split by the coming presence of the thunderclap God. Someday he will awaken. He will not neglect to hear the cries of his creation forever. Fasting intensifies our desire for God and the capacity to hold desire for others. At first, fasting intensifies hunger. Then it quiets both the heart and body, and then increases a desire that can rightly be called homesickness. We are told that Jesus will not drink of the vine nor eat of the earth until we have joined him at his table. He fasts and longs. How does he endure another day without eating or drinking? His words define the nature of a true fast. I have eagerly desired. We are to feel the pulse of our desire. Consider this example. The desire to escape the humdrum of work often hides a deep dissatisfaction with our career. What happens if we admit we hate our work? That acknowledgement may compel us to ask how we fell into the rut. These questions and answers, in turn, may expose the truth that we work merely to put bread on the table for our family. Next, that boredom may compel us to face why we married our spouse. Sadly, too often we married our spouse far more for security and expectation of fulfillment than because of passion or calling. Now, if we look too closely, we risk the relationship. And we risk financial struggle if we confess that our work is for nothing more than a paycheck. I do not advocate running away from one's work or one's spouse, though desire aroused ruins conventional complacency. And what will be left of complacency is eschewed? What happens if we take a close look and find that the life of the elder brother is pointless? We either give ourselves over to the empty pleasures, or we find a deeper pulse of passion and purpose that has marked us from our story. Will we embrace the desires God has ignited? Desire, once aroused, calls us to dream again. And all the dreams require fasting. For me, fasting often comes with simple choices. I can write this chapter while I'm on this plane, or I can choose to watch the in-flight movie. For the weekend athlete, the choice to develop a great fadeaway jumper requires the dreamer to fast from other more pleasurable activities like leaving the gym to carouse with friends or sitting on the couch and eating unhealthy snacks while watching basketball or television. We must nourish the truest desires of our heart and then risk the bold act required to give our dreams the ground to grow. When we embrace desire as holy and honorable, we then offer the same respect to others and their desire. The more we love our desire to serve and sashay with our God, the greater our commitment to help others embrace their desire. It's the way we're made. We'd love to give away what we are given. We love to offer what we have received. Whether it's a CD of a new band, tips about a great new restaurant, or a book that changed our life, we are natural evangelists. We can therefore become the sacred space where other people can name their desire. We can offer ourselves to help others explore desire, and that exploration can be done only in the language of story. A friend may want to buy a condo at the beach to get away from the exhaustion of his work. If you know the ache related to your job and have entered the stories, dreams, heartache, and characters that came with that struggle, then it's likely there will be more room within you to hold his struggle. When you have fasted long enough to listen to your own story, including its darkest parts, you are better prepared to hear and to hold the stories of others. So rather than critique a friend's desire or merely affirm it, give it ground to be explored. Ask questions. Listen to past stories and look for links. Offer an interpretation, but only if it's welcomed. If you do offer an interpretation, keep in mind the most central question of the Bible: where are you, Adam? Will you come forth and name what is true? If we will answer that question, we will go to God naked and broken to receive his grace. After fasting, after taking away the demands and addictions and the flight of shame, then, in the quiet, we can answer the core questions of desire. Where am I? Who am I? And what do I want to become? Those core questions are key to decision making. Of course, there's nothing inherently immoral about owning a beach condo, but first, desire and story need to be explored. Before a friend purchases a place where he can get away from a home that is not a place of rest, he must ask why his life in general and his home in particular prevent rest. His answers may be standard. My life is stressful because I'm working really hard while the market holds out. Or her reasons may be connected to her story. My family couldn't survive if I didn't contribute to our income. Will you hold a friend's desire with all its deceit, fear, and ugliness? Will you hold it and lift it to the face of God? Fasting prepares your heart to hold the desires of others and lift them to the face of God in prayer. Fasting removes the boulders and tills the ground of our hearts for sowing. The fruit of true fasting is always an engagement with our truest no and yes, and we find and expend our deepest passions in the face of injustice and darkness. Fasting deepens our surrender and increases our passion for God. But so what? For some people, fasting is nothing more than a spiritual exercise that at best connects them more firmly to God. It may make the person more alive and committed to God, but beyond the subjective value and perhaps some fallout of good for those nearest to the penitent, so what? True fasting centers us in the heart of God for the sake of those who are orphans, strangers, and widows. From beginning to end, the Bible is about justice. To fail to see the social engagement of the gospel is to be blinded to the deepest and truest meaning of Christ's death and resurrection. The gospel is the shalom of God offered to every tongue, tribe, and nation, an invitation to be received into a new kingdom and to follow the King of Kings in establishing a holy priesthood that worships God in spirit and truth. Furthermore, salvation is an invitation to every part of our being, including our body, relationships, money, children, reputation, space, and time. So if you know God, then you are involved in setting free those who are hamstrung by injustice in any of its forms. The prophet Isaiah stripped the religious elite of his day down to their naked hypocrisy when he exposed their pretentious piety and fastidious fasts. And he named what God desires for a fast. No, the kind of fasting I want calls you to free those who are wrongly imprisoned and to stop oppressing those who work for you. Treat them fairly and give them what they earn. I want you to share your food with the hungry and to welcome poor wanderers into your homes. Give clothes to those who need them and do not hide from relatives who need your help. If you do these things, your salvation will come like the dawn. Yes, your healing will come quickly. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. Then when you call, the Lord will answer, "Yes, I am here." He will quickly reply. Stop oppressing the helpless and stop making false accusations and spreading vicious rumors. Feed the hungry and help those in troubles. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as day. The Lord will guide you continually, watering your life when you are dry and keeping you healthy too. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Isaiah's words take my breath away. Here's the nature of a true fast. All the bread you save is to be given away to those who are hungry. House the stranger and clothe those who are naked. Release the political prisoners. And when relatives call forth our care because they share our blood, we are not to pull the curtains tight and pretend we aren't home. Instead, we are instructed to engage with the faces and the stories of those around us who have been ravaged by lust and silenced by violence. Our fasting is meant to make us heirs with the downtrodden because that is who we are. The Isaiah passage goes on to affirm that we intuitively know what to be true. Our hunger aligns us with beggars and thieves, with the undesirable and the broken. And once aligned with them, we are not called only to help the poor dears. We are invited to name our own poverty and need. If we heed that call, then we are invited to join other orphans on our Father's lap as together we call him Abba. As we give our bread and clothes to the hungry and the naked, we are freed of the curse of addictive possession. But we don't think, I'm advocating merely giving to the poor. It's easy, yet still infrequent, to give a donation of undesired clothes to the local thrift shop or a token few dollars to the bell-ringing Santa and feel as if we've done our duty. Or we might expand our horizon and serve food at a soup kitchen or be part of building a home for a needy family. All such gifts are not only acceptable, but choice offerings to God. Still, Isaiah is clear on the extent and full meaning of seeking justice for the orphan, widow, and stranger, because every one of us is an orphan, a widow, and a stranger. The passage is simple and elegant. Will you make space in yourself for those who need you? And then, will you give from your excess? Once you welcome and share with someone who is avowedly hungry, naked, burdened, and wandering, your life will never be the same. The person may be a prostitute sold into the sex slave trade or a multimillionaire entrepreneur. The hungry come in all forms. Welcome them. Stretch out your arms and share. Sit at a table and eat and talk together. Once the conversation begins, if your heart has fasted and there is space in you to welcome and share stories, you will experience the most exquisite benefit. As God promised, you will become a watered garden. In the ancient Near East, water was at a premium. Growing a garden just trying to keep a few plants alive would often require the huge investment of labor necessary for hauling water from a well. So the image of a well-watered garden was a metaphor for Eden. The paradox ought not to be lost on us modern Westerners. Fasting takes us to the desert, to the arid emptiness that is the space where we enter into a mortal fight with God in order to participate in a glorious surrender to Him. When we enter the desert, though, God honors us by turning the dusty terrain east of Eden into a shalom, a denouement, a taste of Eden. This story of my fast may seem slight and silly to you, but I offer it nonetheless. I was teaching a sexual abuse seminar when I was exhausted from the rigors of a just-ended academic year. As I taught, I felt that I was stumbling. The night before the seminar began, I got to the hotel late, ate an unnecessary dessert, fell into bed, and watched television for several hours, flitting between channels as though I were looking for the Holy Grail. The next day on the phone with my wife, she said to me, "Why don't you give up television for the rest of the time and fast for dinner and the rest of the evening?" I was furious. She clearly had no idea of the degree of exhaustion or demand that had taken hold of me. I certainly did not need this additional opportunity to suffer. Nothing, of course, could have been further from the truth. Reluctantly, however, I did what my wife suggested. The first evening was anything but glorious. I ached and raged. My prayer was self-absorbed and my mind wandered. When I finally went to bed, my stomach ached, and every time I started to fall asleep, it nudged me with the reminder that I was hungry. I felt like a fool swinging between abject contempt for being so godless and foolish for this act of contrition and hope that only seemed to increase my sin and despair. At 2 or 3 a.m., I finally fell into periodic slumber. The next morning, I taught from 9 until 10:30 a.m. When the seminar group took a break, the host had an announcement to make, so I made my way to the men's room and sat in a stall just to get away from people. My efforts all seemed ridiculous. Finally, I mustered enough courage and strength to re-enter the realm of conversation about abuse and God's healing plan. Seconds after I stepped outside the restroom door, a middle-aged Korean woman asked me for a few minutes' time. She stood at about 4'10", and she was severely handicapped. She asked a brief question, and I answered it. Then she looked at me and softly said, "God has taken me from a dark world into a light and hope that I never thought possible, and He has used your life to do so." There is a joy in knowing our life has been used for good. But in this moment, the quiet of her words amidst the noise of my own heart caused me simply to stare. Then she told me her story. I grew up in an orphanage in Korea until I was 10. It was a dark, lonely, and cruel place. I was abused many times each day. When I was 10, I was taken by the American missionaries into their home, and the next 6 weeks were the happiest of my life. After 6 weeks, my new father began to sexually abuse me, and that lasted until I was 18. He intended to keep me as a sexual partner forever, but I fled at 18 without a penny, and I eventually put myself through college. Now I am a nurse. I lived from that point until I was 42, never believing there would be a day I'd be free of the darkness, shame, and emptiness. And then I read your book, The Wounded Heart, and I entered into a fight that seemed harder than the abuse in the orphanage or even the decade of abuse by my father. It was a war of hope. I hated you. Several times I destroyed the book and had to buy a new copy. But over time, the Spirit gently and kindly wooed me to see that God loved me and had written my story for His glory. Her words were compassionate, but I felt caught in a moment of haunting glory. The woman took my hands in her petite grip and looked into my face. Once she had my full presence, she spoke, "You are a tired man. I suspect you often want to quit, but I want to tell you that I am alive and I know joy, and it is in large measure due to you. Thank you for having made space in you for me." I thought I was going to melt. I looked at her eyes, and she was so resolute and bold. There were no tears, just a passion and strength that made me feel as if I were staring into the face of a lion. I felt like a little boy even though I towered over this small woman, and all I could do was weep. The tears rose like a breaking wave, and I could no more resist its force than stop time. What am I to do with a God who chooses to father me through a middle-aged Korean woman? Had I made space in myself for this orphan, somehow in spite of myself, I must have opened some sliver for God to use. Was it the pitiable fast of the night before, or was it some other moment years earlier? I didn't know, and I didn't care. The woman put her hand on my arm and said, "Go teach. And don't quit." I obeyed her face, her strength, and her words. I went to the podium and gave away the flowering fruit from a well-watered garden that I don't recall planting or laboring to maintain. I gave away food that was first given to me. If we open our heart to the fast, we will indeed have more to give away than we can fathom. Wow, there we have it, chapter 11. I don't know. I find this book to be truly beautiful. It touches me, it resonates with me, I get it, I understand it. It moves me, it fuels me with passion and desire. I hope everybody else is enjoying it. Thank you. Chapter 11, To Be Told, Dan B. Allender, PhD.